Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar on renal nutrition. My name is Dr. Pritesh Patel and I am Medical and Scientific Head at Nestle Health Science. Today, the discussion will go around key insights on nutritional management in dialysis patients. And for the discussion, we have three eminent speakers, Dr. Umesh Khanna, who will be moderating the session, and Dr. Jignesh Pandya and Mrs. V. Champa Mazumdar as a panelist who will be discussing on the renal nutrition. To say a few words about each of our panelists, Dr. Umesh Khanna is a senior honorary consultant nephrologist at Asian Heart Institute, Karuna Hospital and Suchak Hospital, Mumbai. He is also a director at Lancet Kidney and GI Center. He has over 25 years of clinical expertise in the field of nephrology. He is currently a secretary of Mumbai Nephrology Group, a chairman of Mumbai Kidney Foundation. He is also a trustee of COREP Trust and trustee of Sapien Foundations. He is also a secretary of Amar Gandhi Foundation and All India convener for IMA's CKD Prevention Cell. Welcome to Dr. Umesh Khanna. It's an honor to have you as a moderator for our scientific session. Our next panelist is Dr. Jignesh Pandya. Dr. Pandya is a senior consultant at Department of Nephrology and Renal Institute at Apollo Hospitals, Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh, with about 18 years of clinical expertise. He has the credit of developing the Department of Nephrology and successfully conducting 32 kidney transplants in Bilaspur, which is the first transplant unit in the region. He personally supervises more than 80 dialysis patients every day and has patients on long-term dialysis with no complications for more than 8 years. He has been directing one of the largest state-of-the-art CAPD units in India. He is also a member of many national and international nephrology and transplantation societies and is widely respected for providing services of international standards at a center located far away from the metropolitan cities. He has the credit of successfully conducting the first EBO incompatible transplant of kidneys in the state of Chhattisgarh at Apollo Hospital, Bilaspur, and has successfully started the chronic ambulatory peritoneal dialysis program in there. So welcome, Dr. Jignesh Pandya. And our second panelist is Mrs. V. Champa Mazumdar. Mrs. Mazumdar is the chief clinical dietitian at Apollo Hospital, Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh. She has completed her PG in food and nutrition and PG diploma in dietetics from All India Institute of Hygiene and Public Health, Kolkata. She has over 18 years of rich experience in various multi-specialty hospitals and has associated with Apollo Hospital, Bilaspur since last 13 years. She has served as a president of Indian Dietetic Association Chhattisgarh chapter from 2015 to 2018. She is instrumental in implementing the clinical nutrition practices in hospital through training and education. She is also very actively associated with IDA Chhattisgarh chapter and has done many CSR activities. So welcome, Mrs. Champa Mazumdar. So now without further ado, I will respect Dr. Umesh Khanna sir to share the overview on malnutrition of clinical chronic kidney disease in patients. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pritesh, and good evening to both Jignesh and Champa. I always knew that they were very popular, but going by the number of registrations almost touching 500, it almost confirms the popularity of both these speakers. I'm actually just going to introduce the topic and put it in proper perspective. The reason why we wanted this talk today is that, doctor, what should I eat is the most important question in the mind of a CKD patient as well as his caregiver. But unfortunately, diet is not given its due importance in the nephrology curriculum, in our medical training as doctors, and so on. Also, diet and dietitians play a very pivotal role in the management of CKD, especially in a poor country like India. Diet, why is it important? Not just in the topic of today, that means not just for dialysis patient, but it has multifold advantages. It is important not only for prevention of kidney disease, for controlling the kidney disease so that it doesn't worsen, preventing the admissions, hospitalizations, if you look after the salt, the water and the potassium, and also it prevents the complications like cardiovascular toxicity, atherosclerosis, and so on. Lastly, of course, in dialysis, it is one of the most important method of preventing malnutrition, and malnutrition is not alone. It disturbs the entire ecosystem of a dialysis patient, which you will hear from Jignesh, not only the protein energy wasting, but inflammation and atherosclerosis and so on. So, if you are basically a diabetic CKD, then it is worst. A diabetic CKD patient went to a doctor and innocently asked his doctor, "Kya khaun?" He said, "Arey, you have kidney failure. You stop proteins, otherwise urea will go up. Oh, you are diabetic. You stop carbohydrates. You have tendency for heart disease and atherosclerosis. No fats. You have so much of swelling and blood pressure. No salt. And you have so many symptoms of burping and gastropathy of diabetic autonomic neuropathy. No spices. And your potassium is 6. You can't eat fruits. And rest, of course, everything else, if you want, you can eat." So this is the plight of a diabetic CKD patient when he goes to a doctor who is not well versed with how to plan diet. The answer should have been, better go to a qualified dietitian. So the role of dietitian is so important that unless every nephrologist, cardiologist, physician has a dietitian with him, we are bound to face the situation of malnutrition or poor nutrition. And how is Indian patient different? एक तो malnutrition is highly prevalent in India. It is underdiagnosed. We don't have the tools, or we don't actually try and measure the degree of malnutrition. Then our diet is predominantly vegetarians, cereals, pulses. We do have a lot of non-vegetarians, but their non-veg is what? On a Sunday they have a little bit of chicken, or on holidays something or the other. So our basic food is also poor in high biological value proteins. Renal part, there is another problem. The diet is very restrictive, and apna palate is all spicy from day one. If you see a thali, when you go and eat in a thali restaurant, pehle salt aata hai, then chutney aati hai, then achar aata hai, and then the rest of the things come. So when bachpan se that habit is there, compliance is bound to be poor. Secondly, Indian patients are very poorly informed, and more often they are misinformed about diet. Advice तो थोड़ा ले लेते डाइटिशियन से, but they tend to listen to their relatives, friends, धोबी, पान वाला, काम वाली बाई, next door neighbor, secretary of the building. He sends a lot of WhatsApp messages, all that. And most importantly, the dietitians will bear with me that they are so surprised and shocked when they are asked to pay dietitian fees. And I'm sure Jignesh also faces, Champa also faces the same problem. They will ask about diet, every patient, whether he is operated for hydrocele or whether he is on a ventilator for COVID. Diet to पूछेगा. Every ventilator patient also they ask, what should I eat? The other problem is there are challenges of kidney patients. As the CKD progresses, appetite goes down, smell, taste, gastroenteropathy leads to fullness, kabhi constipation, sometimes diarrhea, bloating. So all that eventually leads to malnutrition, sarcopenia, etc., etc. And it is not just proteins. We are faced in renal failure about fluid problems, electrolytes problem, acidosis becomes another issue, and bone issues aa jate hain. Erythropoietin nahi hai, so anemia and cardiac failure. And then of course, many admissions are due to pulmonary edema or malignant hypertension due to salt retention, and then bone disease because of bad intake of phosphorus, calcium poor, parathyroidism, and so on. And all that is eminently treatable by managing the diet well, which is why we decided to have this important symposium on diet. And I'm sure they will tell you why in India dietary therapy is less effective in renal failure. The other issue which I think we should touch upon is that the caregiver sometimes is too harsh. If it's husband, the wife piche pad jati. If it's wife, the husband doesn't allow him to eat anything. So there's a lot of pressure from the spouse. All this my dietitian friends would actually corroborate. And of course, there is limitation of food selection. Some items may protein jada, in some there is potassium problem, in some there is salt, in some there is phosphorus. So there are many other issues which makes dietary therapy less effective. Every nephrologist does not have a dietitian. You need minimum 5 visits per year for adequate dietary surveillance. They don't even come once. Otherwise, once you give advice, uske baad, it's all over. They have their own ways of eating. And how difficult to wean them away from years of cultural dependence on gatia, dal mot, samosa, vada pav, pickles, chutneys, all that, depending on where you stay. So hence, malnutrition, nutritional issues in CKD patients. Over to my two esteemed panelists to educate you on all these matters. I thought I will just put this whole thing into perspective as to why is it important to understand diet and why dietitian plays a pivotal role in management in dialysis, not only dialysis but CKD patients. Thank you, and now I would request the speakers to take over.
Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful context setting. It was quite interesting to know what the challenges and how the patient faces in terms of nutrition. So now let's see how we can actually help such patients, and let's hear more from Dr. Jignesh Pandya on fundamental principles of nutrition in dialysis patients. Over to you, sir.
So, very good evening to everybody. Respected Dr. Umesh sir.
Thank you.
Champa madam. Thank you, sir, for setting the perfect scenario in the background of to explain the typical Indian scenario in the context of dialysis patient. So today we are going to discuss some fundamentals and principles of nutrition and diet recommendations in dialysis patients. I am not an expert on nutrition in this area. It is just that I've been working as a senior nephrologist since so many years, and day in and day out we deal with these issues related to diet in different patients, who can also include challenging patients in these circumstances. So our objectives today is to have overview of kidney function and what happens when kidney fails. Then what are the metabolic changes that takes place in CKD? Then what are the markers of nutrition and assessment? How to assess nutrition? Followed by how to prevent and treat malnutrition. And lastly, what are the diet recommendations in dialysis patients? So to set the background, I would like to just tell you in brief what do kidneys do actually, what is the function of our kidneys. The main function of kidney is excretory function, that is to excrete the metabolic waste products, and so that we can keep the level of urea and creatinine and a lot of other toxins in the constant level. So that is number one main function, excretory waste products. Number two function is the maintenance of water, salt, electrolytes and acid base. So any disturbance in physiology or in disease, whenever it occurs, the kidneys are responsible to maintain the balance of water, maintain the balance of salt, electrolytes and acid base. And number three function of kidney is synthetic function. So kidney also provides something, kidney synthesize three hormones, namely renin, vitamin D3, that is calcitriol, and erythropoietin, which is responsible for RBC production and to keep the hemoglobin in a normal range. So what happens when kidneys fail? So all of these functions of kidney, excretory, maintenance function and the synthetic function, get impaired. So the resultant things is the predominant thing is salt and water retention in most patients. So it will create edema, it will increase hypertension, or it can even generate hypertension, or it can worsen hypertension. Salt retention, edema, hypertension, Then there is a disturbance in the maintenance function of electrolytes and acid base. So the tendency of most patients is to cause hyperkalemia, and it is very dangerous because hyperkalemia can kill the patient. There is impairment in acid base in balance, so it creates metabolic acidosis, and it is most of the times chronic. So it causes acidosis, hyperkalemia. There is the total balance of calcium and phosphorus is disrupted. So the main resultant problem what we see is low or normal calcium with high phosphorus, which increases as the kidney diseases progresses to end-stage disease. And this high phosphorus is responsible for stimulation of parathyroid hormone, so it causes increased PTH levels in the blood, and which is a toxic molecule in that range. And lately anemia. So these are the things happen. Now we are going to discuss today the cascade, which we call inflammation malnutrition cascade in CKD. We are focusing on malnutrition because the CKD across all stages of CKD, you might be knowing there are stages of CKD from stage 1 to stage 5, and we initiate dialysis when kidney function is so low that it causes severe impairment in intake of the patient. It causes malnutrition, and there is threat to life because of the hyperkalemia, acidosis, salt water retention, and uremic symptoms. So across the stages, there is a chronic state of inflammation. Kidney failure per se is a pro-inflammatory status, and coupled with its causative factors like diabetes and some other comorbid conditions, and the drugs what the patient is taking and diet restrictions, it causes very severely impairment in gut function. So gut motility is reduced, there is reduced protein digestion, there is reduced protein absorption. It changes gut flora, and it creates a lot of toxic molecules in the gut, which is absorbed in the blood also. And so the whole function of the kidney is impaired, and as the sir told that there is an ecosystem of the patient, the normal physiology is completely deranged. There is a persistent state of inflammation, and this inflammation is all the time it is aggravating the malnutrition. So the malnutrition degree increases as the stage progresses. So as you can see, there are stages here, and as you can see, stage 2, 3, 4, as the disease progresses, you will see that malnutrition prevalence it increases. You can see in stage 5 disease, even in United States, malnutrition prevalence is up to 75%. And you can see that as the disease progresses, it causes low and low appetite. So the day by day or the time by time, the appetite gets decreased. So the patient's intake gets decreased. So it again impairs the nutritional status of the patient. And at some point of time, patient is not able to take adequate calorie and take adequate nutrients. And apart from other metabolic disturbances, and at this time we tend to initiate dialysis to normalize things to some extent, and then again the appetite increases. So to identify this problem of malnutrition, International Society of Renal Nutrition and Metabolism in 2009, they coined a term which we call PEW, that is protein energy wasting, and it is a state of decreased body stores of protein and energy fuels. And why this is important to be recognized and to be acted upon is because PEW is the strongest risk factors for morbidity, mortality, and impaired quality of life in patients who are undergoing maintenance dialysis. So unless you address these factors very aggressively, the quality of the outcome is going to be affected. So we want to be we not only provide dialysis for life, we provide dialysis to increase the quality of life and to make the patient more productive. So the aim is not to just provide a support, the aim is to normalize the life as far as possible. So we want to mimic the physiology. So What are the causes of protein energy wasting? We saw that it's very highly prevalent in later stages of CKD. So what causes it? So there are multiple factors of protein energy wasting or PEW. Number one is when kidneys fail uh, because of decrease in excretion of metabolic waste products. There is a this milieu or the milieu of when the toxins are retained in the body. We call it uremic milieu. We call it uremic milieu, and this milieu is very toxic. It affects a lot of organs. The first organ which is being affected is our GI system. So patient's intake goes down. The patient is feeling anorexic, they are feeling nauseated, they have early morning nausea and vomiting, and their intake goes down. This is number one. This is just because of the this we call a main uremic symptom. Whenever we are asking for the symptoms of uremia, we first thing what we ask is तुम खाना खा सकते हो कि नहीं, तुम्हारी भूख लगती है कि नहीं, तुम कितना खा सकते हो, ये सब चीजें बहुत जरूरी है. So dietary restriction are also in place, because when as the sir told you, when the kidney disease progresses, we tend to cut down on many, we tend to restrict a lot of things. Apart from the decreased intake, and along with the decreased intake in this dietary restriction, it is a significant factor for protein energy wasting. Number two is anorexia, which is a part of uremic symptom. Number three is volume overload, which is a state of positive salt and water balance, and there is excess amount of fluid in the body. The heart has to work more, and there is most of the times there is a concentric left ventricular hypertrophy, or sometimes overt heart failure. There are a lot of endocrine changes which takes place, that including calcium phosphorus imbalance, increased PTH hormone, decreased vitamin D availability. Apart from this, there are a lot of comorbid conditions associated, which may be responsible for the cause of kidney failure, like diabetes, like cardiovascular disease, like sometimes chronic lung disease, or undergoing repeated infections. Then there is a persistent state of metabolic acidosis, a persistent state of stress, and at micro level there is oxidative stress, increased inflammation in general. And when the patient comes on dialysis, dialysis itself uh, will be responsible for loss of nutrients like amino acids. You lose amino acids whenever you go for dialysis. So all of these factors, they contribute to PEW. And what are the result? What is the result of this thing? The result is we, what we assess, like there is a loss of protein mass, there is a lot of there is loss of fat, there is increased fat relative to protein, there is increased water, there is increased salt and water, there is edema, there is heart failure, there is growth retardation and cardiovascular complications, and decreased albumin. All of these are detrimental to the patient, and it increases the mortality and morbidity and impairs the outcome. So whenever we talk about diet, we have two components of diet. Number one is pre-dialysis diet, and number two is dialysis diet. Now we will not talk about pre-dialysis diet. The pre-dialysis diet, the whole idea is to decrease the progression of kidney disease by restricting some elements in the diet. But when we come to the dialysis part, we have to, apart from these things, we have to focus more on treatment of PEW and diagnosis of PEW. We have to ensure that there is a net positive nitrogen balance or net positive protein balance. There is a net positive anabolism, and at the same time we restrict potassium to in its range. We restrict salt and water. We address the fluid issues, and we are at the same time we also address the hyperphosphatemia tendency in these patients. And the whole idea is to provide a good quality life to this patient, making sure at the same time the patient should not be malnourished, and at the same time the patient should get adequate nutrients, cutting down the harmful excess potassium and salt. So every dialysis you lose some protein and some energy, and uh, along with the dialysis, because of other comorbid factors, there is a nutritional deficiency, which again aggravates this thing. So our aim as nutritionist or doctor is to recognize PEW early and identify the markers of PEW. Suppose if we know in theory what is PEW, we have to have some tools by which we can recognize this PEW. We recognize this PEW in early stages and we prevent or treat it. So how do we assess nutrition in a particular patient? So there are three basic fundamentals of assessment. Number one is diet, number two is physical examination, and number three is some lab values. So diet is sort of, it is sort of interrogation. To have an idea about what actually the patient is taking, what actually patient's requirement is, and how we can support. So here comes very important role of nutritionist, because as a basic, clinicians, we can just tell them the guideline, but we have to have a nutritionist as a important member of our multidisciplinary team. And without nutritionist, we cannot give a better outcome because these issues cannot be addressed. So for diet, we monitor symptoms of the patients and what are the cause of symptoms and how we can correct it. And we can sometimes take detailed notes on the diet, and we can just serially see these patients, and because once the patient on start of the dialysis, patients might have uremic symptoms. At the dialysis progresses, then there should be improvement in these factors. So it is a serial thing. Sometimes you can you can have a dietary recall by which you take a past history of diet and what all corrections you need. Number two is physical examination, which aims at measuring BMI and some other parameters like anthropometric values, which may be of limited utility and not in most centers we are doing it, but it is absolutely important to understand this. And whenever you are dealing with a difficult patient, you have to have these values in a serial way so that you can have idea on which way the patient is progressing. Weight loss, progressive weight loss is very important factor in this thing. So what we see is like if the patient has lost his dry weight more than 5% in 3 months, we would call it weight loss, and it is one of the important criteria of PEW, or more than 10% in 6 months. This is again important criteria of PEW. If the BMI is going low, then it is a criteria which tells you that there is PEW. Now, the most important factors apart from these two things is the laboratory parameters, and single most important laboratory parameter is serum albumin, and it has to be followed very rigidly and meticulously, because albumin tells you what is happening inside the patient. So if the albumin is remaining in a normal range, we are happy. We are rest assured that patient is doing well, the dialysis is working, and all comorbid and other problems are being checked. But if the albumin is going low, low means there is a, by definition it should be less than 3.8 milligram, 3.8 gram per deciliter. It suggests PEW. And low albumin does not reflect always a diet deficiency. It reflects a lot of other things. It reflects undercurrent inflammation, stress, volume excess, inadequate dialysis, metabolic acidosis which is being not corrected, right? So albumin is very important factors, and one can see PNA, that is protein nitrogen equivalent appearance. So this is more of theoretical interest, and we are not measuring this in practice. Apart from this, one can measure some other parameters, we'll come to it. And all this assessment like diet, lab value and physical assessment, how frequently it should be done. So as sir told you that at least 5 visits in a year, dietitian needs to pay to the patient. And unfortunately, we have not in all places we have organized dialysis services or where there is integrated team is working. So many a times it happens that patient is taking dialysis, rest of the things are like भगवान भरोसे चल रहा है एक बार बोल दिया चल रहा है. But ideally if you have a regular dietitian in your team or team of dietitians, then it would be very helpful. That will increase the quality of outcome like anything. So measurement should be performed routinely on all patients. Monthly, what we should do monthly, apart from blood urea nitrogen before dialysis and after dialysis, the albumin value. Although we in practice we check serum albumin every 3 monthly, but it can be checked every monthly. Then all of the other parameters what I told you, it should be periodically assessed, preferably every 3 monthly or quarterly. And one can have dietary interview every 6 months. One can have a tool which we call subjective global assessment. It will be further, explained by Champa madam. It is very important and very good tool that we can imply in our patients every 6 months. Then measures that can be useful to confirm the this anthropometry parameters like skin fold thickness, which can be a measure of fat store, mid-arm muscle circumference, which can be a parameter of protein. It should be checked very periodically. And in a difficult patient, one can go for imaging to know the muscle, the fat mass as well as the bone density by DEXA scan. And in other biochemical parameters, we can check creatinine. Now, there is a question that once we have started dialysis, the creatinine should decrease. But the fact is like creatinine remains in a constant range. So the healthy range for a normal weighing patient of creatinine should be around 5 to 15. So if creatinine is going down day by day, and if the patient is not passing urine, and if there is no adequate kidney function, then it is suggestive of protein energy wasting, because once you lose muscle mass, the creatinine goes down. The creatinine comes from muscle. So, and if the creatinine is remaining in normal, I mean, say around 10 or so, or within this range of 5 to 15, we are sure that the patient is not losing muscle. So that is very important parameter. Now, why we are stressing again and again on albumin? Because albumin can predict the mortality at the onset of dialysis. So those patients who are initiated on dialysis with low albumin values, you can see in this curve that mortality rate, the risk of dying of all causes is very high, almost double than those patients. You can see here, this is on a normal range. Once we start dialysis, at this range, the risk of dying is, say, if it is 1, and if you somebody started on very low range, the risk of dying is high. So it increases the risk of dying of all causes. And albumin is not only nutrition, albumin is reflected, low albumin is reflected because of any infection, which may be acute repeated infections or chronic infections, inflammation, comorbid conditions like diabetes and heart failure, not addressed fluid, inadequate dialysis, blood loss, metabolic acidosis. So these all factors can decrease albumin. It is not only low intake which decrease albumin. So one has to go simultaneously. We have to check simultaneously everything, and we have to address all correctable things. So this is subjective global assessment tool, which is dependent on change in weight, change in diet, and GI symptoms like anorexia, nausea, vomiting, and change in uh, fat and protein mass. So there is a scoring system, and I think Champa madam will discuss it. These are some other laboratory parameters which we can we can use in assessing PEW, like serum prealbumin. If it is low, it is bad. Serum transferrin, if it is high, it is good. Serum total cholesterol. Now as far the cholesterol goes, we everybody know that total cholesterol is a bad marker. It reflects increased risk of cardiovascular disease. But in a kidney patient like CKD patient, it is not so. It is a reverse marker. So if cholesterol is low, it is bad. So cholesterol has to be in a healthy range. So we call it reverse risk factor in the kidney failure scenario. Serum creatinine, as I told you, low creatinine in absence of residual kidney function. You will see some of the patients have some kidney function which remains, and on that patient is on dialysis. So in these patients, serum creatinine may be on the lower side, but those patients who do not have any residual kidney function, a decreasing serum creatinine is not a good sign. It is a sign of protein energy wasting. These are important anthropometry and body component measurements, and we all know as a dietitian, and it reflects uh, various measurement like muscle. You measure muscle arm, mid muscle circumference at arm level, and it can also be assessed on imaging like CT or MRI. Although we do not use it very frequently, bone density can be measured, and DEXA scan is very useful tool. Excess water which may be insensible, sometimes salt and water retention is reflected in manifestation of hypertension and edema and sometimes dyspnea. But many times it happens that even apparently the patient is having normal volume, but he remains hypertensive, and there might be water or salt excess, and we can use a machine which we call bioimpedance assay to know the excess water. So in this type of scenario, we can set the weight to a little lower level in dialysis, so we can further reduce the amount of water. And fat amount can also be assessed by skin fold thickness test, measurement and DEXA. But all of these parameters, to be very frank, we are not using very frequently. Exceptionally, we are using, and the serial measurement by one single assessor is more useful rather than in pieces. So, clinical utility of these measurements in a routine dialysis scenario is doubtful. We generally go by dietary history and the by observing more how the patient is taking, how the patient is gaining weight. We generally follow weight parameters, well-being parameters, patient's intake, and improvement in biochemical parameters like serum albumin. And there are some other parameters like waist circumference or hip circumference or waist hip circumference, waist hip ratio. All of these parameters, if they are increased, it reflects a high risk of dying. So once we know that there is PEW, once it is diagnosed, apart from dialysis and other factor correction, what we can do, we have to recommend diet in a way that it corrects this PEW. So recommendation of protein and calorie is very, very important. So the protein intake for dialysis patients should be 1.2 gram per kg per day, and more than half of the protein intake should be of high biology value. So these are the diet recommendations from KDOQI and European best practice guidelines. And it is based on a lot of observational studies, but there is no randomized controlled trial on this. Calorie intake should be 30 to 35 kilocalorie per kg per day. And what can we treat if we know that there is PEW? What are the things what we can do? We can treat, we can identify the comorbid problems, and we can treat this. Like comorbid problems, like in a diabetic patient, very important component is gastroparesis. That means there is a nerve damage to the nerve, and the decreased motility, GI motility is there. So the patient intake goes down. So we can give some drug to improve the motility of the gut. There is a problem of chronic constipation is very common. We can improve the diabetic status. We can improve the neuropathy. We can address the socio-economic conditions because status, because anything you can do, but if the patient is poor and if the patient is not taking adequate dialysis. So number 2 point is dialysis adequacy. And by default, most of the patients in India, they are on inadequate dialysis. So we are not able to correct the uremic factor properly. So mostly, half cooked, half treated patients. So it becomes very difficult because of under dialysis or inadequate dialysis, we are not able to correct the resultant inflammation in the body, and these factors uh, uh, are very important. Patients are not able to afford erythropoietin hormone. There is anemia, and this anemia will again cause cardiac problems, and it adds to the inflammation malnutrition cascade. Uh, Whatever you do, but the patient, if the patient is poor, it's very we feel that we are handicapped. We cannot do anything. There are many drugs which can impair the motility of the gut, and we can address by changing these drugs. Undercurrent infections and inflammation, like some patients are on dialysis via catheter, and we have to take care of this catheter very meticulously with all aseptic precaution. But this, uh, you know, intermittent infections, what happens in these patients, they will further impair the problem and the nutrition, and will cause PEW. So one has to be very aggressive in treating infections. uh, there is a problem of insulin resistance and physical inactivity in most patients. So at the same time we address all other issues, we have to give that confidence, and we have to take help of other team members to promote the activity, physical activity of the patients. Now, what are the nutritional requirements for a typical dialysis patients, by which we provide adequate nutrition in form of energy, protein, and other elements. And this would be discussed by Champa madam, so I'm leaving. So this is a slide which shows how much we are losing on a single dialysis. So every time the patient goes for hemodialysis, a single session, there is a loss of amino acids. That is 6 to 10 grams per dialysis. So it is a significant loss. So that's why all dialysis patients should receive high protein diet and high biological value protein diet. If the patient is on CAPD, then also patient is losing a lot of protein and amino acids. You can see the CAPD, the loss of protein can amount to up to 15 grams per day. So CAPD patients may require more protein than hemodialysis patients. In hemodialysis patient tends to lose glucose also, because in a dialysate solution we do not have glucose, and there is a gradient when the filter is when the blood is coming in the contact of dialysate in the filter, and the glucose will drain down to dialysate solution. So loss of glucose, we have to provide glucose also. In a diabetic patient, also, uh, those patients who are diabetic, it happens that whenever the dialysis goes on, and after dialysis there is a correction of metabolic excess toxins, and it will improve the insulin sensitivity. So there are more chances of patient going for hypoglycemia, because insulin suddenly become active. Previously, before dialysis, because of the inflammatory factors and toxins, the insulin was not that effective. Once you correct with the dialysis, insulin will become effective. There is improvement in insulin resistance. So suddenly there are chances of hypoglycemia. So we have to provide glucose during dialysis also, especially in diabetic patient. Protein, as I told you, it should be of high biology value protein, that is 50 to 70% should be of high biology value protein. And in most scenario, we are taking uh, in a typical Indian diet, we have dal and pulses and other things, but we are not. It is not of high biology value protein. So one has to explain in that way. और हमारी जो आदत है जो हम सालों से खाते आए मतलब बचपन से, it is very difficult to leave that metabolic memory, and we will stick to our diet. So there has to be addition of some other thing which can provide the uh, which can fulfill the need of this high biological value protein. And many times the practical problem is, if I'm a vegetarian, I would be hesitant to take animal protein, where you get high biological value protein in animal sources only. So many patients, they just refuse, and we have to provide some supplement, right? As calorie is, see, every uh, guideline is just a guideline. It has to be individualized. It has to be tailor-made as per the need of the patient. So if our guideline says that you provide 35 kilocalorie per day, uh, and the patient may be of low muscle mass, not active, physically inactive, uh, extremes of ages. So there is not much expenditure on physical activity. The resting expenditure of energy is higher in CKD patient, but because of the limited or restricted movement and activity, one may not need that much amount of calorie, but this is a guideline. So we have to individualize, and you have to judge, but in a broad recommendation is like 30 to 35 kilocalorie. If the patient is old aged, you can cut down on calorie. Now here there is very important thing to discuss is all diabetic patients. We write number one diabetic diet. So by default, the diabetic diet is uh, is cutting down the calorie. This is the fundamental of diabetic diet. We just tend to cut the calorie in all dietitians. But all uremic patients or dialysis patients, they require a huge amount of calorie and adequate calorie. So here I would like to tell you all that in my practice, I do not recommend a low calorie diet to any dialysis patients, even if they are diabetic. So at the most, you can address the diabetic status, the hyperglycemia with the dose adjustment in insulin. But you have to give a fair amount of calorie to these patients. So as compared to other patients or non-kidney patients, you just don't try to cut down on calorie. Uh, the most important thing for CKD patients is sodium and fluid. Now, sodium, as we all know, that the salt. Uh, Most CKD patients undergoing dialysis, they do not have any residual or little bit of residual function. And most patients, they are almost oliguric. They don't have much urine output or no urine output, and they tend to retain salt and water, and this salt and water is responsible for severe hypertension and heart failure and edema, and it impairs the quality of life, it impairs the nutrition. So sodium restriction is the paramount important for all kidney patients. Very few patients you will find that because of their basic disease, they might have good amount of urine output and they are on dialysis, and they have a mild to moderate hypertension and not much of the retention. They might be euvolemic, they might be sometimes absolutely no weight gain between dialysis, and you will perceive that their salt requirement maybe given in a normal range. Even in these patients, there is insensible amount of salt which is being retained in the tissue. So we tend to give a moderate amount of salt, but we do not tell them to take normal amount of salt. Now, normal amount of salt in typical Indian diet is quite high. It's at least 15 gram to 20 gram. So, depending upon the culture and the region which the patient is residing, but salt restriction must be there. In general, the salt should be restricted to 2 grams, the sodium, and it translates into sodium chloride. That is a typical salt. It should be around, say, less than 5 grams, not more than that. And we always say that patient should take at least, uh, not at least, maximum 3 grams of salt per day in 24 hours. So why we stick to this 3 gram value? Because if we say 3 gram, they will just touch, maybe they may touch 5 grams. And even in this scenario also, just by recommending or saying the patient, it does not ensure that the patient is going to take less salt. But salt restriction is very important. Unless you restrict the salt, you will not have good outcome in dialysis patients. They will be symptomatic, they will be hypertensive, and it also depends on the fluid, the amount of urine output. But in general, the salt restriction should be at least maximum 3 grams per day. Potassium is very, very important. There is tendency of hyperkalemia in all patients who are undergoing dialysis with and those who do not have any residual kidney function. But it is not the rule. Many patients you will find that they are low in potassium, and low potassium sometimes reflect poor nutritional status also. But in general, so the for salt, the important parameters is your clinical judgment, the volume status, the hypertension control, and other things, edema. For potassium, you have to measure. Unless you measure the potassium, you won't come to know that patient is deficient or excess in potassium. But by default, all patients are most patients are hyperkalemic, and unfortunately, most patients they are on inadequate dialysis. So they come twice in a week for dialysis, and where the general recommendation is minimum 3 times in a week dialysis. So there is a gap of 4 days in between dialysis. So during this gap, the potassium will be regenerated, and the dietary intake will be there. So there is a tendency for hyperkalemia. And why we are very much worried about potassium is the potassium is a silent killer on in a CKD patient. So if you have hyperkalemia, it may be asymptomatic and it can cause certain cardiac arrest also. So the foods which are should be high in potassium should be restricted. Taking into the consideration what are his serial values, the serial potassium values for that particular patient, the nutritional status of that patient, the disease of that patient, the diet, the drugs that what the patient is taking. There are a lot of factors in potassium, but potassium management should be individualized. Uh, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, but there is
So,
some background disturbances. I
sorry.
guess I will request everybody to keep their microphones on mute.
And then the calcium balance, it is not in our control, but we have to know that the active component of vitamin D, that is calcitriol, is produced by kidney. And most patients we have to give calcium supplements as well as the vitamin D in active form. But with the dietary measure, we cannot address calcium issues. Uh, so we'll skip calcium. Uh, Another issue is phosphorus. Like most CKD patients on dialysis, they have such a reduced kidney function that they are having tendency for hyperphosphatemia. The phosphorus level increases. Now, generally, the phosphorus is excreted by kidneys, and this excretion is taken care uh, in till very late stages of CKD. So when GFR is very very low, then there will be a tendency for increase in phosphorus because kidney is not able to excrete more phosphorus. And this phosphorus, when it increases, it along with the calcium, it causes serious problems like soft tissue calcification and hyperparathyroidism. So it has to be addressed very very aggressively. There are three measures of addressing phosphorus because actually we want to have phosphorus in a very very low range, but we cannot address this with diet. So because any diet you recommend, mostly because we are recommending high protein diet, so all high protein diet by default they contain phosphorus, so we cannot cut down phosphorus. So we have to give some medicines which can bind this excess amount of phosphorus in the diet. So when the patient is taking meal, they have to take these medicines, and these medicines will bind to phosphorus component in that particular diet, and it will decrease the absorption of phosphorus. Apart from that, adequate dialysis is very very important to keep the level of phosphorus in check. And as far the food goes, if you are giving organic some of the food which contains organic phosphorus like dairy products, meat, and so the phosphorus in these food is not absorbed in a much amount. Whereas if you are so if the patient is taking some prepared food additives or components where there is a direct phosphorus available, it will be absorbed in very high level, like food additives and dietary supplements and fortification. Like somebody is taking, some tetra pack of dairy product, there is a direct phosphorus available. So we have to avoid this food and we have to promote this food. Uh, so we can address phosphorus by binders and dialysis. So each dialysis also removes a lot of phosphorus. But again, even with this thing, phosphorus control is very difficult sometimes. So here we can do aggressive and more dialysis. Uh, so this is like summary of what is the nutrition in CKD and hemodialysis. Now the main issue is like identifying PEW and then identifying the factors which are responsible for PEW and you identifying the correctable factors, like if there is infection we have to correct infection, if there are some social factors availability problem we can guide them. uh, After doing all these things, we have to provide adequate dialysis. The patient has to take oral diet in adequate form, which provides a good amount of nutrition. Some extra addition of proteinaceous diet, and if it is not working, in many patients we have to give oral nutritional supplement (ONS). And these oral nutritional supplements, if taken properly, it should work fine over few months or few weeks with the proper dialysis. The patient nutritional status should improve. The patient should get vein. The muscle mass should improve, but sometimes it doesn't occur. So in that case, one can do what one can do is we can provide tube feeding. So because all protein preparations, they are not very palatable. I don't know how much of us have taken protein preparation in a high concentration. Like even a tablet of vitamin, if you take, you will feel nauseating sometimes. So this protein preparation are not very palatable. So although you prescribe, but it's very important to check the compliance whether the patient is taking or not. There may be limited palatability and limited intake of this protein preparation. So sometimes one has to give through enteral feeding or tube feeding, and if it doesn't work, then one can go to parenteral nutrition. So the role of nutrition supplements, when to initiate nutritional supplements, what are the indications? So if there is weight loss, as I told you, at the same time weight loss and at the same time when the serum albumin is going down, then one can start oral nutrition supplements apart from all other things what we have discussed. All what is the impact of this oral nutritional supplement? Of course it improves the parameter, it improves the anthropometric parameters and some biochemical markers if other factors are kept in check, but no randomized controlled trial has showed that it improves the survival. So that is very important, but in general it is quite helpful. Oral supplements are always better than IV supplements because IV supplements have their limitations. This is again the same thing. One has to have functional GI tract which can absorb the nutrients. Then you can give enteral nutrition orally or in the tube feeding form. And oral nutrition, a lot of preparations are available. It's very helpful. Many patients in Indian scenario, they are already malnourished. Even in a health, we are malnourished. Sometimes we are protein balance is on the lower side, and once they are having CKD, their protein levels again go down. So we have to provide with supplements, and when these things are not working, one can go to IDPN, that is intradialytic parenteral nutrition. So it's a sort of a supplement. It's a partial support of very essential nutrients like amino acids. So if you see typical intradialytic parenteral nutrition, what is intradialytic? Intradialytic means that during the dialysis time, we are providing some IV nutrition which contains these things. The majority of this content is amino acids and coupled with some energy of fuels like glucose and lipids. The aim of this continuous intradiabetic parenteral nutrition is to provide a positive balance of protein. So what is better, oral or IV? All trials showed that IV is not better than oral if the patient is able to take the proper intake of oral. But sometimes there are some limiting factors by which you are not able to give oral nutrition, and also sometimes oral nutrition doesn't work over few months, then you can go to IDPN. Now the main disadvantage of IDPN is they are very costly. They are tailor-made and they are costly preparations, and they provide a limited amount of calorie. And this is during dialysis only. So in between dialysis, again there is a negative balance. So it is just a support. It is just a supplement. Now, regarding oral nutrients, many patients they do ask you that हम क्या Horlicks ले सकते हैं, क्या Boost ले सकते हैं, क्या Bonvita ले सकते हैं. The major problem with oral nutrition is like we want to provide nutrients as in a tailor-made fashion, where we want to keep the level of sodium in a low range, level of potassium in a low range. For those patients for whom the potassium is not a problem, whose potassium levels are being checked, and in those patients you can tell them that uh, they can take bucket because they are cheaper. But otherwise, mostly by default, oral nutritions are also costly. So this is the last slide, which summarized everything what we have discussed, and it says that one has to detect PEW early with all these tools what are available with us. So this is periodic nutritional assessment, including serum albumin, weight, BMI, and other parameters. This is daily protein intake. So in a dietary interview and coupled with some further test, you can see you can analyze what are the patient's real intake is. And then there is a nutritional assessment by subjective global assessment, and continuous preventive measures like this is the job of a team consisting of nephrologist and dietitian, where we address all other factors like adequate dialysis, acidosis, comorbid problems, diabetes, inflammation, congestive heart failure. We have to address the depression also, which is very important factor because it's a lot of stress. All CKD patients receiving dialysis, they are in immense stress. And when this parameter goes down into the range of PEW, one has to act very vigorously to promote nutrition by giving adequate advice. If the patient is not able to take, you supplement with oral nutrition or IV nutrition. You check again if the albumin is in normal range and weight is increasing, just wait there and you can see, and later on you can withdraw oral nutrition. And if the patient is not improving, then you can give tube feeding and give extra amount of nutrition by tube. And even if it is not working, then you can convert to IDPN. And these are some resources for you. And this is open resource. This is free. You can go into kidney.org, and it summarizes all clinical practice guidelines for nutrition in chronic kidney disease. And this is the latest update. It is freely available. Anybody can check. The guidelines have recommended the same thing what we have discussed, but there is a rationale behind it. There is logic behind it. There is a support of a lot of studies, so one can go through, and one can also refer to this book, Handbook of Nutrition and the Kidney. These are the two important resources for which I could find. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that insightful session. It was quite interesting to know, the different principles, key principles on nutrition from a nephrologist point of view. But still, there are some doubts reserved, regarding diet planning for such patients. We have a lot of questions, but we will take it in the end once Ms. Champa's session is done. So now it's time to hear from our, diet expert. What are the common common nutrition myths and how can we substantiate those myths with the facts to help the dialysis patients. So I invite Ms. V. Champa Mazumdar, Mrs., to take us through an interesting myth busting session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Namaste to all and very good evening. And I would like to thanks respected our Dr. Umesh Khanna sir, respected our Jignesh Pandya sir, Dr. Pritesh, and entire Nestle team and Indian Dietetic Association. With the collaboration, we have programmed this, we conducted this. Today, just we discussed about already Jignesh sir explained every regarding nutrition part. Only I just discuss nutrition myths and facts of dialysis patients. In this part, when prevalence of the malnutrition and factors predicting malnutrition, it's mainly malnutrition is common among dialysis patients, and the prevalence range from 18% to 56% of protein energy wasting. And these are the factors are this disturbance in protein energy metabolism, hormonal dearrangements, infections, and other superimposed illness, and reduced food intake. So these are the reasons which there is a factor of the prevalence of malnutrition. This is nutrition. A lot of nutrition barriers are comes in when we are counseling to the patient, like medical barrier, behavioral barrier, social economic barrier. Patients having very poor appetite, they refuse to take food, and we are trying to take. We have to go for the rounds, IP as well as the OP patients to make them understand that it is very important to take your food. Then they having some depression, they are always trying to refuse, and they want to they should be as per their liking we should be give, and whatever we are counseling sometimes they are not try to understand, and continuously we are make them understand, and successfully sometimes we are successful for that. Many patients they understand ki this madams they are coming and they are trying to take something, so they are cooperating sometime. But same time that poor total nutrition knowledge also, because of they are in the dialysis but they know clinical dietitians are there to make them understand, to give the about the diet knowledge, lack of knowledge. And these are the lot of factors are there which is patients not understand, and they are always refuse to take as per the restriction diet. In this, we are trying to always continuous counseling to the patient to maintain hemodialysis patient. Personal nutrition counseling, we are continuously giving IP as well as the daycare dialysis who is coming to decrease their hyperkalemia, decrease in hypophosphatemia, and normalize protein catabolic rate, increase phosphorus level, calcium phosphorus. This all things should be in a proper as per the requirement of that particular patient during the dialysis, after the dialysis, so that we patient should comfortable and they take food properly. There is target dietary approaches, mainly dialysis patients, like potassium. Educate, we are trying to educate to the patient low, moderate, or high potassium rich foods, how to given. We always continuously we are counsel to the patient, like when they are saying potassium restriction, we can't take any fruits or vegetables, that we always trying to make them understand that foods can be taken, yes, because whenever we are giving calories, high calorie diet, high protein diet, so at that time fruit they want to take and we have to satisfy them. For that part we have to be make them understand, and which type of and which fruits contain low potassium, that we have to be explained, like papaya, guava, pineapple, apples. These are foods can be taken. That is in the restrictions low potassium. Only we have to be make them clear that should be 40 gram food should be taken, two medium slices, so that patient also will satisfied and the restrictions also will be continue. In the same time, for the vegetables also we trying to make them understand. uh, Many food vegetables, there is a lot of high content potassiums are there, and that is they should not take regular basis. But yes, there is lot of low containing potassium also vegetables are there, like bottle gourd, perwal, like beans. Then after that, many other vegetables also there, which is very low contain rich gourd. This is all are low contain potassium. So we are always in the counseling, we are trying to make them understand this vegetable which is low content potassium you should be taken, so that your satisfaction also will be there. If other vegetable you take, you have to leach out after cutting, leach out the water and wash it running in the running water, so that calcium will be discarded. But in the same time, with the potassium, other nutrients also discarded. So uh, we are always make them understand that you try within low potassium content vegetables can be taken. If you are going come sometimes, if you feel to take, so you take other vegetables, but in the same time you have to be take precautions, because other nutrients also going discarded. So better you have to give in a limited low potassium vegetables. Sometimes for change you can go for other vegetable also, but that should be bleach out. Then a lighter approach to fluid intake also we have to be educate regular basis, that practical solution and managing thirst and fluid intake, such as sometimes patient they are saying very thirsty, it's not possible to take in within this limit of fluids and all. So evenly distributing fluids intake throughout the day, how they will do, so that always we are trying to make them understand, like whatever our whole day diet we are serving to them. So that time we always going and counseling them, "Okay, this is your food, this is the timing, this is the quantity of as per the calorie protein." And same with that, whatever the liquid, that whatever the liquid part is there, like milk, tea, or dal, any liquid form which is we are serving with the food, that is might be, if it is restriction 1.5 liter per 24 hours, then we counsel them, "Okay, this is the 500 ml fluid will come through your diet, and rest of the 1 liter you can take plain water." So they understand ki, yes, this is the liquids we can take in a whole day. But sometimes patients not taking liquids, like sometimes tea not taken. So that is also we are during the counsel we should make them understand and counsel them, if you are anything reducing from your liquids, so you can increase a little bit of more water, so that in all total it should become in a 1.5 if patient on that much of requirement of fluid. So this is the one of the our counseling part should be cover up to make them understand and make them satisfied. In during after this, when we are meeting with the patient, we always doing subject global assessment, as Dr. Jignesh Pandya also told, that we are doing regular basis when we are going for the patients dialysis patient. Monthly we are doing assessment also, and the subjective global assessment nutrition part we are taking each and every patient. In our practice, in our setup, we are doing subject global assessment, and in that part is details of, in I have shown showing this weight changes we are taking. In no weight changes of gain 1 second, minor weight loss less than 5%, or weight loss 5 to 10%, weight loss 10 to 15%, weight loss more than 15%. This we are assessing during the assessment. Dietary intake, what is the duration, no change, any change of suboptimal solid diet, or either full liquid or moderate over disease. So these points we always taking care when we are going for the HCA, hypochloric liquid, either patient star on starvation or not. That also we have to confirm. Then we have to check gastrointestinal symptoms, duration. No symptoms are there, or nausea is there, or any vomiting or moderate symptoms, diarrhea, either severe anorexia, whatever that patient having, they are saying us, and accordingly we are doing that. SGA, functional capacity, non-improved, difficulty with ambulation, difficulty with the normal activity, light activity, either bedridden or in the bed in a chair. So that functional activities also we have to be check details from the patient. And comorbidity, like healthy, mild comorbidity or moderate comorbidity, or the range of age, it's more than 70 years, 75 years, or severe comorbidity. So very severe multiple comorbidity, this we have to be checked during the subjective global assessment when we are doing for patient. And physical examination, decreased fat store or loss of subcutaneous fat, that also we have to be during the patient details we are taking. Normal, no changes, moderate or severe, or any sign of muscle wasting is there, as explained by the sir, that protein energy wastage, even any wasting is there, then we have to be checked. Then we have to be calculate after these all details when we are taking with the interview, taking with the patient all details, and we are taking that in the forms which we are practicing here, and we tick the scores, and finally we are calculating that in which score it is coming. If it is patient is 7 to 14 score will come, that means patient is well nourished. If it is score is comes 15 to 29, it will come moderately malnourished. Then 29 to 35, it's severely malnourished. And accordingly that we are deciding how much calorie protein should be given for that particular patient as per the BMI, and we have to be go for the next step. Now we'll just, I want to brief about the nutritional myths and physical activity. It is very common that are you overwhelmed by daily decisions about what to eat, how much to eat, when to eat, and how much physical activities you have and need to be healthy. If so, don't discourage, because you are the not no, alone with so many choices, decisions. It can be hard to the know what to do, which information can trust. In these informations we have to be take with the patient. And myths generally having about the patient, about the protein, that patient end stage of renal disease, low protein diet will help decrease the waste product accumulation in the body. This is the low way having the myths. For that, we can say depending on the GFR, that stage of kidney function can be determined, and the amount of the protein to be ingested can be planned. When GFR reduces, waste product from protein digestion builds up in the body. In this case, protein restriction is required. So this dialysis, whenever protein is, we are talking about the proteins, we should know we should give high protein diet, and that to be decided at first of the BMI, what 1.2 to 1.4 gram per kg body weight, that have to be decided during the assessment. Now regarding salt myths also, they have patients always they are in confusion how much and what quantity salt to be taken. As salt is restricted in dialysis diet, patient can use salt substitute with a no quantity restriction. Low sodium level are due to restriction salt intake. So fact is daily sodium requirement is 1500 mg, upper limit is 2300 mg. If renal function is impaired, then sodium will be restricted 500 to 1000 mg per day. If you are advised to restrict salt intake, be careful about the causing salt substitutes, as most of the them that high is salt. Like patient always saying how much quantity I have taken, because when we are calculating the sodium, that when we are advising to the patients, we are advising 1 teaspoon, half teaspoon, as per the patient's sodium level, right? Because if we will suggest 5 gram of salt, namak, sodium chloride, so that will come sodium only near about 2000 mg. Okay, so 1 teaspoon of salt, if we recommend, it will come sodium near about 2000 mg, 1950 near about it comes. So we have to be calculate, we have to check the sodium reports. So it is fluctuation, sometimes fluctuate, so we have to check, we have to talk with our consultant, we have to do the teamwork, always keep in touch with your consultant. So this is the things are going on, this is the potassium is coming, so sir, what we have to do, fluid is like this, its output is not there. So this always we have to keep in touch with our consultant, accordingly their reports we should be given restriction and counsel. Salt fact, sodium part of salt, sodium found in many canned foods, packaged, frozen, fast food, and sodium condiments, seasoning, and meats. These all are containing lot of salt, lot of sodium. So try to eat fresh, naturally low sodium food. Look for the products labeled low sodium. That should be mentioned over there. So this time, and but always try to take outside this canned food, should be try to avoid. Now potassium, it's like people with kidney problems should be on a low potassium diet. Okay, so low potassium diet, that means not like that they have everything they have to stop, they should not take any vegetable, they should not take any fruits. That is not a fair, that is not correct. We have to be make them understand. If they are saying madam aapne to sab band kar diya mere ko, then we have to give the options. These are the low potassium containing vegetables, these are the low fruits containing potassium containing fruits. So only we should mention them that how much quantity and how much and what is the timing to take their foods. Measure 3 meals and 3 snacks. With the fruits also we can recommend it, but that should be check which is low contain potassium, like papaya, guava, pineapple, pears. These are the low potassium content foods can be given. But if it's patients having more than 5 6 potassium, then we should be stop that for the few days. After next report only we have to discuss with the consultant, then only we have to suggest to the patient. Calcium, this is also one of the good sources of calcium or dairy products for dialysis patient. Many patients they are not able to take this milk because of the patient having some this lactose intolerance. Sometimes some patients they don't liking, so there are many plant-based sources also calcium there. These foods are especially important in the diets. Those who are the lactose intolerance, have the milk allergy, so we can advise them which is high content calcium, so that they have to be like tofu also there. Half cup of tofu offers for 30 mg of calcium. So this type of options we should be given to the patient. Phosphorus means low phosphorus diet best for the kidney disease. This is also one of they feel that. So we always try to make them understand what quantity we are fixing for that particular patient, that should be taken by the patient, because phosphorus if is mineral found to your bones, along with the calcium, phosphorus is needed to build strong healthy bones, as well as keeping other parts of your body healthy also. So we have to be take some amount of phosphorus. It plays an important role how to body cause of uses carbohydrate and fats. It is also needed for the body to make protein for the growth, maintenance, and repair for cells tissue. So this is very important mineral which we have to be given. Iron also, because ESRD patients is only due to poor intake of iron-rich foods. So it's erythropoietin pumps the bone marrow to make red blood cells, which then carry oxygen throughout the body. So we have to be a function of the kidney to impaired. They do not make enough erythropoietin. So as a result, the bone marrow makes fewer and red blood cells, causing anemia. So we should be taking care of the iron side also, and whatever the medication is going on by the consultant, we have to be planned for the iron. And but yes, in these patients mainly their consultants advise their erythropoietin pumps for the their maintain their hemoglobin level. So it's a diet also, we can little bit we can give some advice to maintain the iron. Fluid myths also there, which already briefed earlier also, like whenever patients having uh, fluid restriction, we should be first confirm with our consultant. Accordingly, sometimes output plus 500 ml for the intake we can recommend, whatever the output plus 500 ml for the intake in the next 24 hours. But in the same time, patient's condition and some symptoms, so we have to be confirmed with the consultant that how much should be fluid restriction will be. And that once we have confirmed, then only we have to plan either 1.5, either 2 liter, either 1 liter. Accordingly, that we have to hold a diet, we have to be fixed. And that liquid also we have to fix 300 400 through the whole day diet. And rest of the you can take plain water. Same thing we are counseling during the IP patient as well as the OP dialysis also, because IP patients, they regularly we should be tell them, otherwise they feel thirsty and they wants to take more water. So that time we have to counsel, and sometimes they refuse to take tea, refuse to take milk. So we have to compensate that on, okay, if you are not taking this, you can take a little bit of more water. So this counseling should be continuous with the patient to make them comfortable. They have to follow your instructions. Renal diet, it's a myth, you should not take this and that, but we have to be go for proper counseling, that how much restrictions of protein, potassium, and your fluid restrictions, salt, that we have to be counseling accordingly their investigations report, biomedical biochemical report. So accordingly we have to be planned and tell them, we should not stop everything. Dialysis diet, you can eat when whatever you want when on dialysis. This is generally, its myths are there, but in the same time, all foods can be taken in moderation if clinical parameters are in normal limit or accordingly. Otherwise, we have to be go for the investigations report can be changed, how much should be given or not, that we have to be restrict plan accordingly investigations report. This is nutritional requirement in the dialysis patients for the as per the SPEN guideline. Energy is 35 kilocalorie per kg body weight, and for the hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis, 35 kilocalorie per kg body weight, and protein 1 to 1.4 gram per kg body weight, and that to be we have to be include more than 50% high biological value protein, and 1 to 2 to 1.5 gram kg per kg body weight, and sodium, it should be 1.8 to 2.5 gram per day, and that too, if we'll talk about the salt, that will goes to the 5 gram, and potassium 2000 to 2500 milligram per day, and for the peritoneal dialysis 2000 to 2500 mg per day, phosphorus 800 to 1000 milligram per day, and same for the peritoneal dialysis also. This dyslipidemia is very frequently happening. 60% of developed dyslipidemia, positive association between the cholesterol and atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease involved, as Sir mentioned and explained, that patient with elevated serum total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, DGL, recommended diet rich in whole grain, low glycemic index food, high fiber carbohydrate foods, vitamin E, monosaturated fat should be advised by the dietitians, clinical dietitian. They should go through the lipid profile, whatever the flexibility in reducing or increasing accordingly. We should plan and guide to the patient. These few points to be remembered. for all time. For the dialysis patient, your choice about what to eat and drink while on the hemodialysis can make a difference in how you feel and can make your treatment work better. We always try to make them understand for this. Between dialysis treatment session, was can build up in your blood and make you sick. You can reduce waste build up by controlling what you eat and drink. So it helps to limit or avoid foods and beverages that have lots of like potassium, phosphorus, sodium. These all it's increasing because of that. So we have to be like vegetable juice, sport drinks. These are the generally increasing the potassium, phosphorus, sodium. So we should try to avoid this. And points another things are you may feel better if you keep track of and limit how much liquid you eat and drink. We should counseling on that. Hemodialysis removes extra fluid from your body. However, hemodialysis can remove only so much fluid at the time safely. If body your treatment may make you feel ill, so you may get muscle cramps or have a sudden drops in blood pressure that causes you to feel dizzy, sick to your stomach. So these things always we have tried to make them understand things to always keep remember. Potassium level rise, we have to be taking care of that. If it is increasing, we should give low. If it is decreasing more, then we have to sometimes give high potassium food also. And too much phosphorus your blood repels calcium from your bones, so losing calcium may make your bones weak and likely to break. So phosphorus we have to be taken care. And renal dietitians encourage most people on hemodialysis to eat high quality protein, high biological value protein. And because of produces less waste of the removal during the dialysis, we have to be taken high quality, high biological value protein comes from poultry, meat, fish, and eggs. So we should be recommended for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that wonderful presentation. It was very informative, and I think we are also getting a lot of feedbacks that it was an excellent presentation. So it will definitely help everybody in their daily clinical practice. So now we have a lot of questions already. So we'll go for the questions. So, ma'am, how to plan a diet keeping in the mind the level of urea, creatinine, and alkaline phosphatase? So this is one of the questions asked by Ms. Antara Bhattacharya ji.
This should be answered me or Dr. Khanna or Dr.
So you can answer. Anybody can. Anybody is okay. If anybody wants to add, anybody can answer.
All three be with their audio
Yes.
on.
Yes. Audio and
video on.
Yes.
Champa, of course, will be the star of the day. He has to answer most of you're the most important batsman. Yeah.
You want to answer?
So a lot of questions I already saw. Now this in regard to urea, creatinine, and other things. Once we diagnose the CKD, we have to, at some point of time, we have to decide whether the patient needs dialysis or not. Once the patient needs dialysis, we have to initiate dialysis and we have to plan and we have to change the diet accordingly. That is what this webinar was all about. So we are discussing diet on dialysis. So once the patient is on dialysis, the general guideline says that protein, calorie, nutrition, what are the parameters we already discussed, right? And suppose if this question, there was one question where somebody has asked if creatinine is 9, patient is on conservative treatment, what diet I should give. It happens many times that patient is reluctant for dialysis, and especially old patients, they don't want to go for dialysis, and the creatinine is high. By default, we always used to counsel that they should start dialysis, but sometimes they're very adamant. And at this time, we have to judge, we have to use our clinical acumen, we have to counsel benefits and risks of doing dialysis, not doing dialysis. And sometimes what happens that irrespective of creatinine, that there might be some amount of urine the patient is passing, and the volume status may be a fair volume status, and there's some amount of intake is is preserved. So if there are not much uremic symptoms, we can counsel that although the patient requires dialysis, but if at all they want to go on conservative treatment, looking at the condition of the patient, then the patient should be advised conservative treatment of the CKD. In this case, thus the idea is to reduce the protein intake to very minimum level so that to ensure that we do not generate metabolic waste products to higher level, which is possible, which is responsible to give us the uremic symptoms that we discussed, the GI symptoms. And at the same time, we have to ensure the adequate amount of nutrition. So here it is a difficult scenario. So what we do is we restrict the protein to 0.6 gram per kg per day in a standard scenario, and we give some supplements, namely keto analogs, to keep the essential amino acids and protein balance in a positive balance, so that the patient have a good quality of life. But then has to be individualized. Not all patients you can advise conservative treatment. So this is the thing. So ideally at this level, the GFR is negligible, and irrespective of the urine output and other symptoms, one should advise uh, to initiate dialysis. So we should not wait for complications to occur. We want to prevent complications. The idea is that.
I think Jignesh is very right in saying that you should individualize the treatment. A younger patient definitely would require dialysis at this stage. We should push him into going for early transplant, dialysis, and so on. A very old patient, moribund with too many comorbidities, patient not keen, relatives not keen. There is this concept of palliative care which is now coming up in such kind of patients. So only for those patients, then conservative treatment in spite of such a high level of uremia is advocated. So as Jignesh said, that you will have to individualize the patients. Most patients who are otherwise in good health should be on dialysis.
Okay. So, sir, there is another question related to our current pandemic, effects. So, how does coronavirus affects, the kidneys, and how do they affect in these CKD patients? Is there any specific role?
Okay, so coronavirus will affect kidneys in two different types of patients. Those who already have a kidney disease, and if it is mild, if they develop COVID positivity, fever, drugs, and NSAIDs, antibiotics, hypotension, that will push them into advanced renal failure. So what is called as acute on chronic kidney disease. If they do not have a kidney problem, occasionally COVID can worsen. You could have a cytokine storm, you could have hypotension, part of toxemia, septicemia, and an acute kidney injury. Many of them have just fever for 5 to 7 days. They keep taking NSAIDs and developed a little bit of kidney problem. Those who are end-stage kidney failure, their COVID affects them mainly because they come in contact with different other patients on dialysis, and therefore CKD on regular dialysis is a high-risk area where more patients can develop COVID positivity. A lot of dialysis centers will have at least 10% of their patients likely to go into COVID positivity. So, normal person, acute kidney injury, mild CKD can be pushed into more moderate and severe CKD. Those who are on dialysis, there are more chances of developing COVID. They are that way immunocompromised. They could fare worse. And they have a lot of comorbidities like hypertension, diabetes, etc. So many of them actually deteriorate faster than the normal person.
Okay. So there was another question regarding acidosis. So status of antacids in CKD, as you know, acidosis is much common in such patients.
Antacid has nothing to do with the acidosis. It's a metabolic acidosis. It occurs because, as I told you, one of the important functions of kidney is to maintain the acid-base balance or electrolyte balance. So when the kidneys have failed or failing, they are not able to compensate the changes in health and the disease. There's a tendency towards acidosis. And how do we know acidosis? We measure the amount of bicarbonate in blood, either venous blood or sometimes the patient, we feel that patient is having severe acidosis. We measure the acid arterial blood gas, in which the pH sometimes in advanced uremia or a severe problem is an impairment in the pH. The pH is out of range. The pH is low, and that may be very, very dangerous. This is one of the criteria, one of the indications for doing urgent dialysis.
So since we are at, yeah, sorry, no, complete it. I thought you had finished.
So mostly, these all CKD patients, they are acidotic. So this acidosis may be corrected in early stages with the supplementation of soda bicarbonate, and that is one of the important drugs to which also decrease the rate of progression of the kidney disease. But in a dialysis patient, we have to ensure adequate dialysis. That is the number one thing. We have to ensure the adequate dialysis, and you can't do anything else because dialysis itself will correct the acidosis. And at the same time, you have to address the other factors like inflammation and infections. Okay, because this acidosis is detrimental to nutrition, that we discussed.
So I just want to give a little nutritional twist to the acidosis part. What Jignesh says is absolutely true for dialysis patient. Nothing short of adequate dialysis, more frequent dialysis will correct it. And he also mentioned that replacement with soda bicarb or oral sodamine tablets, etc. are used in the earlier stages. As far as diet is concerned, from that angle, it's important to realize that plant-based diet produces less acidosis. Animal-based diet produces more acidosis, like sulfur-containing amino acids and so on, which are produced as a metabolism of animal-based protein. So if somebody is on a conservative treatment, somebody is on pre-dialysis stage, then it's important to shift somebody who has more acidosis into a plant-based diet. I think Mr. Champa also mentioned that how plant-based diets are important for even phosphorus control compared to animal-based diets. So there is a lot of twist now. Even abroad, there is a lot of shift from animal-based proteins to plant-based proteins. Of course, keeping in mind high biological value proteins with that much, at least dairy products or whatever, for a vegetarian, you have to replace it. But in short, plant-based are little less acidotic compared to animal-based. Just a twist in the dietary part.
So, sir, there is also another questions asking, what is the role of probiotics? Are they effective in treating hyperphosphatemia? So do they have hyperphosphatemia? Yes. So do probiotics have any role in that, in managing?
Okay. I thought they were talking of probiotics in chronic kidney disease at an early stage to stop the progression of it. There is a lot of work going on gut kidney axis, of the importance of gut microbiome and so on. But of course, there are no trials which are telling you that it will help. Just that in ancient times we have tried to link up gut with all kinds of diseases, and therefore in non-allopathic science there is a lot of importance given to gut, including from even in COVID they keep on so many things. Now, if at all you want to give phosphorus control, then probiotics have no role for. You will have to give phosphate binders, or you'll have to cut short phosphorus in. As it's a dialysis kind of symposium we are talking of, diet has to be changed, dialysis has to be adequate to remove phosphorus, and then of course, as Champa said, that you will have to avoid preservatives or preserved food, then cold drinks and processed food, etc. Less in our country the problems are, more in Western countries about processed foods and things like that. But in general, in the bigger towns and tier 1 cities, this processed food is coming up. But otherwise, plant-based, because of phytates, the absorption of phosphorus is less, and therefore, for phosphorus, plant-based diet is much better compared to animal-based protein. Animal-based diet.
So, ma'am, for dialysis patients, how much supplemental protein should be given?
Yeah, dialysis patient, they having that appetite, they don't have that much of appetite. So that time we have to be achieve our goal. For that, we are whatever the planning, calories, protein and all. So if patient refuse to take food, then only we have to be go for the supplement scientific formula we have to be advised, and whatever the limited fluid with that they have to mix it and they can take. But yes, when we are talking about the critical care patients, so that time we have to be give complete scientific formula so that everything like phosphorus, potassium, sodium, calorie, protein should be managed properly, and goal should be we have to be reached, because there is lot of fluid restrictions also there. So in the low amount of fluid we should be recommend food supplements so that maximum calorie should be given.
One small comment, the dietitians will have to remember that the caregivers have been in that previous mode of low protein diet. Also because they keep on asking everybody in and around, they get the advice of low protein diet. By the time they go into dialysis, that mode is not changed. They are still in that low protein diet.
Yeah, yes.
So it is very difficult for a dietitian to convince the patient wants it. The caregiver still follows that old regime of low protein diet. He feels mera dialysis kam ho jayega if I go and take low protein diet. So their role is very important, that they push the caregiver.
Very true, sir. That's why we are regularly going to the patient IP as well as who is coming for the dialysis. So every day we are touching to the patient, so that we have to be keep continue counseling them. So at least 100% know the 90% as they have to be understand and start the restrictions or high protein diet.
Yes.
So one has to assess what exactly the patient is able to take or consume, and it has to be a serial assessment over a few days after starting treatment. And if the presenting serum albumin level, if it is fair, then one can just wait for a few days and one can wait for uremic factors to be controlled with dialysis and see whether the diet is improving or not. It's not a one-time affair. But the important parameter is one has to know exactly what is the amount of the protein the patient is able to take in his own diet, because the metabolic memory is so strong that we cannot change our diet drastically. तो साउथ का कोई पेशेंट है कुछ और ले रहा है, गुजरात का कुछ और ले रहा है, वेस्ट बंगाल का कुछ और ले रहा है. So you have to assess exactly that is the very role of diet assessment. Diet assessment is one of the important parameters of nutritional assessment.
Home recall.
So it includes SGA and it includes other tools, questionnaire. So
that's why we are taking home recall, so that whatever the regional wise, whatever the habit of the patient, we should take all details. Accordingly, we have to be planned as per their liking and habits.
There is another parameter PNA, that is protein equivalent nitrogen appearance, which is a reflection of protein intake. So I don't know, sir, are you using any? No, sir.
No,
because we are not using. It is not practical.
Not using. We are very practical.
Yeah.
उसको मुश्किल से वो प्रोटीन खा रहा है अभी, great difficulty.
Exactly.
It's very difficult. One just small point: if somebody is eating an egg and you want to give him a lot of protein, so maybe 2, 3, 4 eggs a day or whatever, then the yolk, if you can cut it off, the phosphorus is a lot in the yolk, and that would help in giving proteins without increasing phosphorus.
Right. Yes.
Protein and phosphorus, they go together. Yodium, Yugalbanti. So that is what you have to do.
Yes, we are following same, sir.
So, ma'am, I think due to the paucity of time, we will take one last question. If someone is having a higher levels of creatinine, so what foods can be restricted and what foods can be allowed?
All right, that is the whole lecture, I think. Just finished that whole thing.
So this was specifically for Champa ma'am.
Yeah.
So this is conclusive.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Please. Yeah, actually, if patient is having renal problem, chronic renal failure stage, if it is in patient, then we have to be restrict protein also, like zero point 0.6 gram per kg body weight to 0.8 gram per kg body weight protein should be given if patient in renal failure. When patient is go for the dialysis, so that time we have to increase the protein. If creatinine is high, then we have to be give high protein if patient on dialysis. At same time, we have to be watch or observe what potassium, sodium, urea, all reports are coming, and we have to be coordinate with our consultant so that how much we have to be continue. But yes, if patient on dialysis, if creatinine is high, then only we have to be the protein we should be given 1.2 gram per kg body weight at least.
One small advice to dietitians again is when they are wondering why the potassium is still high, remember that a lot of patients have been given advice by their physicians or cardiologists to eat low salt, and they are actually eating medicated salt, which is good for cardiology patients because it's a potassium added low sodium salt, but is extremely bad to our CKD patients. And
Is sender number, sender number.
inadvertently it goes on, and they are
Yes.
taking it, and you keep on scratching your head, where is the potassium coming from? It is coming from that Lona salt and Himalayan salt and pink salt and Sindadu salt and so on. So this is another important point in diet and good salt.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. So, sir, thank you so much, for the wonderful discussion.
Oh, discussion. Jignesh and Mrs. Champa did an excellent job.
Yes.
I was only there to see that nobody sleeps, just to keep people
entertained.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Some suggestion. I have seen lot of questions, so you can share our email addresses or you can share
Yes,
our
sir.
contact numbers. So
Sure.
anybody has anything.
Sure, sir. No problem. So thank you so much, for the discussion of interesting topics. And I thank all the participants and the speakers and moderator on behalf of Mr. Abdul Hanan, our business cluster head for South region, and entire Nestle Health Science team. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here and sparing your valuable time with us during these challenging times. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. Bye, Jignesh. Bye, Champa.
Sir,
Bye, sir. Bye.
Bye.